always easy for David. He didn't have to wonder how to finance a new dress. Forget about shoes and a wrap. All through her trigonometry class, she was distracted. As soon as class was over, she bolted to a quiet corner in the library and burrowed through her wallet and backpack looking for money. $6.12. That was all she had to her name right now. A frown settled into place on her forehead and stayed there for the rest of the day. After school, she skipped her decorating meeting and raced home. The bus let her off at the corner of Apple Way and Cascade Street. It was raining hard. No longer a silvery mist, this was an onslaught that turned the world cold and gray. Raindrops hit the pavement in such rapid succession it looked as if the streets were boiling. Her canvas hood was ineffective at best. Water dripped down the sides of her face and burrowed cold and sticky against her collar. Her backpack, stuffed full of books and notebooks and handouts, seemed to weigh a ton. On top of all that, her vinyl shoes had broken a heel 3 blocks ago, so now she was limping down the hill toward home. At the corner, she waved at Bubba, who waved back, then returned to his tattooing. The neon sign flickered tiredly above his head. The smaller sign, posted in the window, "I tattooed your parents," was streaked with rain. She limped forward, past the now-closed Heir Apparent, where her mother allegedly worked, past the mini-mart run by the Chu family, and the teriyaki takeout that the Ramirez family owned and operated. Outside of her apartment building, she stopped, loath suddenly to go inside. She closed her eyes and imagined the home she would someday have. Buttery yellow walls, down-filled furniture, huge picture windows, a wraparound porch overgrown with flowers. She tried to latch on to the familiar dream, but it floated past her, insubstantial as smoke. She forcibly changed her mindset. Wishing and hoping had never put food on the table or brought Mama home 1 minute early. It certainly didn't get a girl a homecoming gown. She walked down the cracked concrete path, past the box of garden tools that Mrs. Mock had set outside last week in a feeble attempt to encourage tenant pride. Soon they would begin to rust. Those tools would be ruined long before someone bothered to cut back the leggy roses and runaway blackberry bushes that covered the back half of the lot. The dark hallway greeted her. She went upstairs and found the door to their apartment standing open. "Mom!" she called out, pushing through the unlatched door. There was a cigarette burning in an ashtray on the coffee table. The mound of used butts was huge. Here and there, smoked-down cigarettes lay littered across the Formica table. The apartment was empty. Mom had probably come home from work about 5, if she'd even made it to work in the first place, then changed her clothes from white trash beautician to biker slut and run off to her favorite bar stool. Lauren hurried down the hallway and into her bedroom, praying all the way there. Please, please, please! It was empty beneath her pillow. Mom had found the money. Chapter 8. Lauren meant to move. She meant to get up, put on fresh makeup, and borrow Susie Mock's suit again, but somehow she sat there, on the floor, staring at the stack of cigarette butts in the ashtray on the coffee table. How much of her $25 had literally gone up in smoke? She wished she could cry the way she once would have. The tears, she now knew, meant hope. When your eyes dried up, there was none. The door swung open, cracked against the wall. The whole apartment shuddered at the force of it. A beer bottle rolled off the sofa cushion and thumped to the shag carpet. Her mother stood in the doorway, wearing a pleated black miniskirt with black boots and a tight blue t-shirt. The top, which Lauren thought looked suspiciously new, made her look much too thin. The once beautiful bone structure in her face was now a collection of sharp edges and dark hollows. Booze and cigarettes and too many bad years had sanded her beauty down, leaving only the stunning green of her eyes. Against the harsh pallor of her face, Mom's eyes were still arresting. Once Lauren had thought her mother was the most lovely woman in the world. Lots of people had back then. For years, Mom had gotten by on her looks. As her beauty had faded, so had her ability to cope. Mom brought a cigarette to her lips and took a long drag, exhaling sharply. "You're staring at me." Lauren sighed. So it was going to be one of those nights. The kind where Mom came home more sober than drunk and pissed off about it. Lauren got slowly to her feet, started picking up the mess in the living room. "I'm not staring." "You should be at work," Mom said, kicking the door shut behind her. "So should you." Mom laughed at that and flopped down on the sofa, putting her feet up on the coffee table. "I was headed that way. You know how it is." "Yeah, I know. You have to walk past the tides." She heard the bitterness in her voice and wished it weren't there. "Don't start with me." Lauren went to the sofa and sat down on the arm. "You took the $20 from under my pillow. That was my money, Mom." Mom put out one cigarette and lit up another. "The homecoming dance is less than 2 weeks away. She paused, hating to admit her need, but what choice did she have? "I need a dress." Mom looked up at her. Smoke swirled in the air, seeming to exaggerate the distance between them. "I got knocked up at a school dance," Mom finally said. Lauren fought the urge to roll her eyes. "I know." "You want my help? I'll give you some advice." "No, that's fuck the dance." Lauren couldn't believe it still hurt, after all these years. When would she stop believing that her mother might change? "Thanks, Mom. As usual, you're a big help." "You'll see. When you're older." Mom leaned back, exhaling smoke. Her mouth trembled, and for the merest of moments she looked sad. "None of it matters. What you want, what you dream of. You live with what's left." If Lauren believed that, she'd never be able to get out of bed, or off a bar stool. She reached down, brushed the blonde hair out of her mother's eyes. "It's going to be different for me, Mom." Her mother almost smiled. "I hope so," she murmured so softly Lauren had to lean forward to hear it. "I'll find a way to pay the rent and buy a dress," she said, finding her courage again. It had left her for a few moments there, and without its heat she had gone cold and numb, but now it was back. She slid off the arm of the sofa and went back to her mother's bedroom. In the overstuffed closet, she looked for something she could redo into a dress for the dance. She was holding up a black satin nightgown when the doorbell rang. She didn't answer it, but her mother yelled out to her, "Miss Marks here!" Lauren swore under her breath. If only Mom hadn't opened the door. Forcing a smile, she tossed the tiny negligee on the bed and went back into the living room. Mrs. Mock was there, smiling. A big cardboard box was on the floor at her feet. Beside her, Mom was buttoning up a beautiful black pants coat made of the softest wool. It had a tapered waist and a shawl collar. Lauren frowned. "It's an old lady's coat," Mom muttered, walking down the hallway toward the bathroom. "Mrs. Mock?" Lauren said. "There's one for you, too." She bent down and pulled a green coat with faux fur trim from the box. Lauren gasped. "For me?" It was almost exactly the coat Melissa Stonebridge wore, the richest, most popular girl at Fircrest. Lauren couldn't help reaching for it, touching the soft fur. "You shouldn't have. I can't." She drew her hand back. Mrs. Mock couldn't afford this. "It's not for me," Mrs. Mock said, her mouth forming into a sad and knowing smile. A woman from Help Your Neighbor brought it by. Her name was Angela. She's one of the Desarias, you know, from that restaurant on Driftwood. I'd say she could afford it." Charity. The woman somehow had seen Lauren and pitied her. "This coat is too old for me," Mom said from the other room. "What does yours look like, Lauren?" "Take it," Mrs. Mock said, pushing the coat toward Lauren. She couldn't help herself. She took it, slipped it on, and suddenly she was warm. She hadn't realized until just then how long she'd been cold. "How do you say thank you for something like this?" she whispered. Mrs. Mock's eyes filled with understanding. "It's hard," she said quietly, "being the one who needs help." "Yeah." They stared at each other a moment longer. Finally, Lauren tried to smile. "I guess I'll go to the restaurant and see if I can find her. Say thank you." "That's a good idea." Lauren glanced down the hallway. "I'll be back in a while, Mom." "Bring me a better coat," Mom yelled back. Lauren didn't dare look at Mrs. Mock. They walked out of the apartment and down the stairs together, neither one speaking. Outside, Lauren waved goodbye to Mrs. Mock, who, although hidden, was always at her curtains, watching what happened on her street. In less than 30 minutes, Lauren was at Desaria's restaurant, opening the door. The first thing she noticed was the aroma. The place smelled heavenly. She realized how hungry she was. "I guess you found me." Lauren hadn't even noticed the woman's arrival, and yet they were standing almost face to face. The woman was only an inch or so taller than Lauren, but she was a commanding presence somehow. First of all, she was beautiful, movie star beautiful, with her black hair and dark eyes and big smile, and her clothes looked like something out of an expensive catalog. Black pants with flared legs, high-heeled black boots, and a pale yellow scoop-neck sweater. There was something familiar about her. "Are you Angela Desaria?" "I am. Angie, please." She looked at Lauren, and there was an almost liquid softness in her brown eyes. "And you're Lauren Rebideau." "Thank you for the coat." Her voice snagged on the sentiment, sounded thick. She realized suddenly where she'd seen this woman before. "You're the woman who gave me money." Angie smiled, but it seemed off somehow, not quite real. "You probably think I'm stalking you. I'm not. It's just—" Lauren thought weirdly that she would say it was fate. "I'm new in town and kind of at loose ends. I saw you and wanted to help." "You did." Lauren felt it again, the emotion thickening her voice. "I'm glad to hear that." They stood there, staring at each other. Finally, Lauren couldn't stand it. She forced a little laugh and said, "If you really want to help, I could use a job." Angie seemed surprised by that. She took a step back and studied Lauren. Have you ever waitressed before?" Lauren nodded. 2 summers at the Hidden Lake Ranch." Lauren fought the urge to squirm. She was sure that this beautiful woman saw every flaw that Lauren tried to hide. The hair that needed a trim, the shoes that leaked in the rain, the backpack worn thin. "I don't suppose you're Italian." "No, at least not that I know of. Does that matter?" "It shouldn't." Angie looked back at a closed door. "But we've always done things a certain way." "And you're not it," Lauren thought. "I understand." "You saving up for college?" Lauren started to say yes, but when she saw the understanding in Angie's dark eyes, she found herself saying, "I need a dress for the homecoming dance." The minute she said it, she blushed. She couldn't believe she'd revealed something so intimate to a stranger. Angie studied her for a moment longer, neither smiling nor frowning. "I'll tell you what," she finally said. "You sit down at this table, have something to eat, and then we'll talk." "I'm not hungry," she said, just as her stomach grumbled. Angie smiled gently. Lauren felt wounded by that smile somehow. "Eat dinner. Then we'll talk." Angie found Mira standing outside the back door, sipping cappuccino, with both hands curled around the porcelain mug. Steam mingled with her breath and formed a mist in front of her face. "Winter's going to come early this year," she said as Angie sidled up beside her. "I used to hide out here as soon as it was time to do dishes," Angie said, smiling at the memory. She could almost hear Papa's booming voice come through the brick walls. "Like I didn't know that," Mira laughed. Angie moved a little closer, until they were shoulder to shoulder, both of them leaning against the rough wall that contained so much of their lives. They stared out at the empty parking lot. Beyond it, the street was a silvery ribbon in the darkening night. Far away, seen in slivers between the houses and trees, was the blue-gray ocean. "Remember that list Livy helped me come up with? The Desaria destruction list, as Mama called it? How could I forget? I think I'm going to make the first change." "Which one?" "I found a new waitress, a high school girl. I think she could work some nights and weekends." Mira turned to her. "Mama's going to let you hire a high school girl?" Angie winced. "A problem, huh?" "Mama will have a cow, you know that. Tell me the girl is Italian at least." "Don't think so." Mira grinned. "This is going to be fun." Angie elbowed her. "Knock it off. Be serious. Is it a good idea to hire a new waitress?" "Yes. Rosa is too slow to handle any more business. I guess if you're going to make some changes around here, this is a good place to start. How did you find her? Employment office?" Angie bit her lip and looked down at the gravel beneath her. "Angie!" This time Mira wasn't smiling. There was concern in her voice. "I saw her at Help Your Neighbor when I went to volunteer. She was there, asking for a winter coat for her mother. That's how I got the idea for the coat drive." "So you bought her a coat?" Was she so transparent? "You said I should help people." "Yeah, I bought her a coat." "And offered her a job." Angie sighed. She heard the mistrust in her sister's voice, and she understood. Everyone thought Angie was so easily victimized. It was because of Sarah Decker. When they'd been set to adopt her baby, Angie and Conlon had opened their hearts and home to the troubled teenager. "It's not like that," Angie said softly. "I'm not investing. I'm just offering a helping hand." "You have so much love to give," Mira said finally. "It must hurt to hold it in all the time." Angie closed her eyes. The words had tiny barbs that sank into her skin. "Is that what it's all about? Shit, I thought I was just hiring a kid to serve food on weekends. Maybe I'm wrong, overreacting. And maybe I don't make the best choices." "Don't go there, Ange," Mira said softly. "I'm sorry I brought it up. I worry too much. That's the problem with family. But you're right to hire a new waitress. Mama will simply have to understand." Angie almost laughed. "Yeah, she's so good at that." Mira paused, then said, "Just be careful, okay?" Angie knew it was good advice. "Okay." Angie stood in the shadows, watching the girl eat her dinner. She ate slowly, as if savoring every bite. There was something almost old-fashioned about her, a round softness that brought to mind the girls of another, more carefree generation. Her long, copper-colored hair was a tangle of curls that fell down her back. Its color was vibrant against her pale cheeks. She had a nose that turned up just a little at the tip and was dotted with freckles. But it was her eyes, unexpectedly brown and filled with an adult's knowledge, that caught Angie's attention and held it. "You won't want me," those eyes said. "You have so much love to give. It must hurt to hold it in all the time. Mira's words came back to Angie. It had never occurred to her that she was stepping onto the merry-go-round of her old choices. Loss was like that, she knew. She never knew when or where it would strike. The littlest thing could set her off. A baby carriage, a doll, a bit of sad music, the happy birthday song. A desperate teenage girl. But this wasn't about that. It wasn't. She was almost certain. The girl, Lauren, looked up, glanced around, then looked at her wristwatch. She pushed the empty plate away and crossed her arms, waiting. It was now or never. Either Mama was going to let Angie make changes around here, or she wasn't. Time to find out the answer. Angie went to the kitchen, where she found Mama washing up the last of the night's dishes. 4 pans of fresh lasagna lined the counter. "The bolognese is almost ready," Mama said without turning around. "We'll have plenty for tomorrow night." "And the rest of the month," Angie muttered. Mama turned around. "What does that mean?" Angie chose her words carefully. They were like missiles. Each one could start a war. "We had 7 customers tonight, Mama." "That's good for a Friday." "Not good enough." Mama wrenched the faucet's handle hard. "It will get better when the holidays come." Angie tried another tack. "I'm a mess at waitressing." "Yes, you'll get better." "I was still better than Rosa. I watched her the other night, Mama. I've never seen anyone move so slowly." "She's been here a long time, Angela. Show some respect." "We need to make some changes. That's why I'm here, isn't it?" "You will not fire Rosa." Mama tossed down her dish rag. It hit the counter like a gauntlet. "I would never do that." Mama relaxed a tiny bit. "Good." "Come with me," Angie said, reaching out for Mama's hand. Together they walked out of the kitchen. In the shadow behind the archway, Angie paused. "You see that girl?" "She ordered the lasagna," Mama said. "Looks like she loved it." I'm going to hire her to work nights and weekends." "She's too young." "I'm hiring her, and she's not too young. Livy and Mira were waitressing at a much earlier age." Mama shifted and frowned, studying the girl. "She doesn't look Italian." "She isn't." Mama drew in a sharp breath and pulled Angie back in the shadows along the wall. "Now look here, do you want me to help you in the restaurant?" "Yes, but then let me help. Rosa will feel slighted." "Honestly, Mama, I think she'll be glad. Last night she bumped into the walls, twice. She's tired. She'll welcome the help." "High school girls never work out. Ask your papa." "We can't ask Papa. This is for you and me to decide." Mama seemed to deflate at the reminder about Papa. The wrinkles in her cheeks deepened. She bit down on her lower lip and peered around the corner again. "Her hair is a mess." "It's raining out." "I think she's been looking for work. The way you did, remember? In Chicago, when you and Papa were first married?" The memory seemed to soften Mama. "Her shoes have holes in them, and her blouse is too small." "Poor thing." "Still," she frowned, "the last redhead who worked here stole a whole night's receipts." "She's not going to steal from us." Mama pulled away from the wall and began pacing the room, weaving in and out of the empty tables. She was talking, whispering the whole time. Finally, she spun toward the window and argued with the air, gesturing wildly. If Angie closed her eyes, she might have seen her father there, standing firm, smiling gently at his wife's theatrics, even as he disagreed with her. Mama spun around. "He always thought you were the smart one. Fine! Hire this girl, but don't let her use the register." Angie almost laughed at that. It was so absurd. "Okay." "Okay." Mama turned on her heel and walked out of the restaurant. Angie glanced out the window. Mama was walking down the street, arguing with a man who wasn't there. "Thanks, Papa," Angie said, smiling as she walked through the now empty restaurant. Lauren looked up at her. "That was delicious," she said, sounding nervous. She folded her napkin carefully and set it on the table. "My mother can really cook." Angie sat down across from the girl. "Are you a responsible employee?" "Completely." "We can always count on you to show up on time?" Lauren nodded. Her dark eyes were earnest. "Always." Angie smiled. This was the best she'd felt in months. "Okay, then. You can start tomorrow night. Say 5 to 10. Is that okay?" "It's great!" Angie reached across the table and shook Lauren's warm hand. "Welcome to the family." "Thanks." Lauren got quickly to her feet. "I better go home now." Angie would have sworn she saw tears in the girl's brown eyes, but before she could comment on it, Lauren was gone. It wasn't until later, when Angie was closing out the register, that it dawned on her. Lauren had bolted at the word family. When Angie got home, the cottage was quiet and dark, and in all those shadows lay loneliness. She closed the door behind her and stood there, listening to the sound of her own breathing. It was a sound she'd grown used to, and yet here, in this house that had been loud in her youth, it wounded her. When she couldn't stand it anymore, she tossed her purse on the entry table and went to the old RCA stereo in the living room. She pushed a cassette into the tape player and turned the system on. She increased the volume. Tony Bennett's voice floated through the speakers, filling the room with music and memories. This was her papa's favorite tape, the one he'd made himself. Every song began late, sometimes as much as a whole stanza. Whenever he'd heard one he loved, he jumped up from his chair and run for the stereo, yelling, "I love this one!" If only he were here. "I hired a new waitress tonight, Papa. She's a high school girl." She wanted to smile, laugh even, but that lightness wasn't in her. In fact, it felt far away. You can imagine Mama's reaction to that. "Oh, and she has red hair." She went to the window and stared outside. Moonlight dusted the waves and glistened along the dark blue sea. The next song came on, Bette Midler's "Wind Beneath My Wings." It had played at his funeral. The music swirled around her, threatened to pull her under. "It is easy to talk to him, isn't it? Especially here." Angie spun around at the sound of her mother's voice. Mama stood behind the sofa, staring at her, obviously trying to smile. She was dressed in a ratty old flannel nightgown, one Papa had given her years ago. She crossed the room and snapped off the stereo. "What are you doing here, Mama?" Mama sat down on the sofa and patted the cushion beside her. "I knew you would have a hard night." Angie sat down beside her, close enough to lean against her mother's steady side. "How did you know?" Mama put an arm around her. "The girl," she said at last. Angie couldn't believe she hadn't figured it out. Of course. "I'll need to keep my distance from her, won't I?" "You've never been good at that." "No." Mama tightened her hold. "Just be careful. Your heart is soft. It feels as if it's in pieces sometimes." Mama made a sound, a little sigh. "We keep breathing in times like that. There's nothing else." Angie nodded. "I know." After that, they got out a deck of cards and played gin rummy long into the night. By the time they fell asleep, side by side on the sofa, curled up beneath a quilt Mama had made years ago, Angie had found her strength again. Chapter 9. Lauren showed up for work 15 minutes early. She wore her best pair of black jeans and a white cotton blouse which she'd gotten Mrs. Mock to iron for her. She knocked on the door and waited for an answer. When none came, she cautiously opened the door and peered inside. The restaurant was dark. Tables sat in shadows. "Hello?" She closed the door behind her. A woman came around the corner, moving fast, her hands coiled in the stained white apron that covered her clothing. She saw Lauren and stopped. Lauren felt like a bug trapped in a child's hand. That was how this woman stared at her, narrow-eyed and frowning. Old-fashioned eyeglasses made her eyes appear huge. "You are the new girl?" She nodded, feeling a slow blush creep up her cheeks. "I'm Lauren Ribideau." She stepped forward, held her hand out. They shook hands. The woman's grip was stronger than Lauren had expected. "I am Maria Desaria. Is this your first job?" "No, I've been working for years. When I was little, 5th and 6th grade, I picked strawberries and raspberries at the Magruder farm. I've been working at Rite Aid since it opened last summer." "Berries? I thought that was mostly migrant workers." "It is, mostly. The pay was okay for a kid." Maria tilted her head to one side, frowning as she studied Lauren. "Are you a troubled girl? Runaway? Drugs, that sort of thing?" "No. I have a 3.9 grade point at Fircrest Academy. I've never been in any kind of trouble." "Fircrest? Huh. Are you Catholic?" "Yes," Lauren answered with a nervous frown. It was a dangerous thing to admit these days. So much trouble in the church. She forced herself to stand perfectly straight, no fidgeting. "Well, that's good, even if you do have red hair." Lauren had no idea what to say to that, so she remained silent. "Angie tells me you've waitressed before," Maria said at last. "Yes." "So when I tell you to set up the tables and wipe down the menus, you know what I mean?" "Yes, ma'am." "The silverware is in that chest," Maria said. "Not that it's real silver," she added quickly. "Okay." They stared at each other. Lauren felt like that bug again. "Well, get started," Maria said. Lauren ran for the chest and pulled open the top drawer. Silverware rattled at the ferocity of the movement. She winced, knowing that already she'd done something wrong. She glanced worriedly back at Maria, who stood there, frowning, watching Lauren fumble through the drawer. It was not going to be easy to please that woman, Lauren thought. Not easy at all. By the end of her shift, Lauren knew two things. She needed to wear tennis shoes to work, and earning enough money for back rent and a decent dress wasn't going to happen at Desaria's. Still, she liked the place. The food was wonderful, and she never went to bed hungry. She worked as hard as she could, trying to find jobs that needed to be done before someone, namely Maria, told her what to do. Now she was refilling all the olive oil decanters. "You know," Angie said, coming up behind her, "this could be a great restaurant if people actually showed up. Here." She handed Lauren a dessert plate that held a piece of tiramisu. "Join me." They sat down at the table by the fireplace. The flames flickered and snapped. Lauren felt Angie's gaze on her, and she looked up. In the dark eyes, she saw something. Compassion, maybe, with an edge of pity. It made her feel uncomfortable. She was used to that look, of course, but somehow it was worse now. Angie had seen Lauren that night in the parking lot, and then again at the Help Your Neighbor house. There were no secrets now. "It was really nice of you to give me this job. You don't need another waitress, though." She wished immediately that she'd kept silent. She needed this job. "We will. I've got big plans for the place." Angie smiled. "Although I don't know much about the business. Just ask my sister, Livy." Lauren couldn't imagine that this beautiful woman failed at anything. "I'm sure you'll do it. The food is amazing. Yeah, my mom and Mira can really cook. Angie took another bite, then asked, So, how long have you lived in West End? Maybe I went to school with your folks. I don't think so. Lauren hoped she didn't sound bitter, but it was hard to tell. We moved here when I was in 4th grade. She paused. It's just Mom and me. She liked the way that sounded, as if they were a team, she and her mother. Still, her family, or lack thereof, was not something she wanted to talk about. How about you? Have you always lived in West End? I grew up here, but I moved away for college and got married. Angie's voice seemed to give out. She stared down at her dessert, stabbed it with her fork. I just moved back home after a divorce. She looked up, made an attempt at smiling. Sorry, I'm not used to saying it yet. Oh. Lauren had no idea what to say to that. She went back to eating. The sound of their forks on porcelain seemed loud. Finally, Angie said, Do you need a ride home tonight? No. She was surprised by the question. My boyfriend is picking me up. As she said it, she heard a car honk outside. She shot to her feet. There he is, I better go. She looked down at the dishes. Or should I? Run along. I'll see you tomorrow night. Lauren looked down at her. Are you sure? I'm sure. See you then. Bye, Lauren said, already moving. At the hostess desk, she bent down for her backpack. Slinging it over her shoulder, she headed for the door. The crowd went wild. Like everyone else, Lauren was on her feet, screaming and clapping. A roar moved through the stands. The scoreboard flickered, changed, revealed the new numbers. Fircrest 21, Longview Christian 14. That was awesome, Anna Lyons said, grabbing Lauren's sleeve and tugging it hard. Lauren couldn't contain herself. She started laughing. David's pass had been beautiful, a perfect 40-yard spiral right into Jared's hands. She hoped his father had seen it. Come on, someone said. It's almost halftime. Lauren followed the group of girls down the aisle and onto the concrete stairs. They hurried down to the sidelines, where the various booths were being set up. She took her place at the hot dog stand, where the annual staff was already hard at work. My turn, she said to Marcy Morford, who was busy refilling the mustard jars. For the next half an hour, while the marching band moved across the field, she sold hot dogs and hamburgers to the sea of people who drifted along the sidelines, congregating now and then to talk. Parents, teachers, students, graduates. On Friday nights during football season, they all met at the stadium for local games. Everyone was talking about David. He was playing the game of his life. When Lauren's shift was over, she rejoined her friends and watched the end of the game. Fircrest kicked the other school's butt. The stands slowly emptied out. Lauren and her friends cleaned up the mess at the booth, then went to the locker room. Outside the door, they stood in a pod, talking and laughing and waiting. One by one, the players came out, hooked up with their girlfriends, and walked away. At last, the double doors opened and a crowd of players rushed out, laughing and talking and punching each other in the arms. David was in their midst, and yet he stood apart somehow, the way Brad Pitt or George Clooney must have stood out in their high school. The floodlights fell on him alone, and right then he appeared golden, from his blonde hair to his bright smile. Lauren ran to him. He separated easily from the pack and pulled her into an embrace. You were great, she whispered. He grinned. I was, wasn't I? Did you see that bomb to Jared? Shit, I was on fire. Laughing, he kissed her. At the flagpole, he stopped, looked around. Lauren knew what, or who, he was looking for. She tensed up, slipped her arm around him, and settled in close. The rest of the kids drifted toward their cars. They heard the distant sounds of engines starting, doors slamming shut, horns honking. "Hey, David!" someone called out. "Are you and Lauren coming to the beach?" "We'll be there," David said, waving back. His eyes were narrowed. He kept glancing away from the lights, toward the field, the parking lot. Finally, he said, "Did you see them?" Before Lauren could answer, she heard his mother's voice. "David, Lauren, there you are!" Mrs. Haynes crossed the courtyard and came up to them. She hugged David fiercely and then smiled up at him. Lauren wondered if David saw the way that smile shook. "I'm so proud of you." "Thanks, Mom." David looked behind her. "Is Dad here?" "He had a business meeting tonight," she said slowly. "He's sorry." David's face seemed to crumble. "Whatever. I'll take you guys out for pizza if you'd like." "No, thanks. There's a party at Claiborne Beach, but thanks." David grabbed Lauren's hand and pulled her away. They walked slowly toward his car. Mrs. Haynes fell into step beside them. In silence, the three of them walked to the parking lot. David opened the door of his Porsche for Lauren. She paused for a moment, looked at his mother. "Thanks for the invitation, Mrs. Haynes," she said. "You're welcome," she answered quietly. "Have fun." Then she looked at David. "Be home by midnight." He walked around to his side of the car. "Sure." Later that night, as they were huddled around the fire, sitting amidst a circle of kids who were talking about the traditional grad night party, Lauren leaned against him, whispered, "I'm sure he wanted to be there." David sighed. "Yeah." "He'll be there next Friday," he said. But when he looked at her, his eyes were bright. "I love you." "I love you too," she said, slipping her hand into his. Finally, he smiled. In the past few days, Angie had worked ceaselessly. Every morning she was up before dawn and seated at the kitchen table, with notes and designs and paperwork spread out before her. In these, the quiet, pale pink hours, she put together the coat campaign and created a series of advertisements and promotions. By 7:30, she was at the restaurant, meeting with Mama to learn the behind-the-scenes routine. First, they visited the suppliers. Angie watched her mother move through the boxes of fresh vegetables, choosing the same things day after day: tomatoes, green peppers, eggplant, iceberg lettuce, yellow onions, and carrots. Mama never paused to inspect the portobello or porcini mushrooms, the brightly colored array of peppers, the baby pea pods, butter lettuce, or rich dark truffles. It was the same routine at the fish and meat markets. Mama bought tiny shell-pink shrimp for cocktails and nothing else. From the Alpac brothers, she chose extra lean ground sirloin, ground pork and veal, and dozens of boneless chicken breasts. By the end of the fourth day, Angie had begun to see the missed opportunities. Finally, she hung back, told Mama to go on home, that she would be along soon. As soon as Mama left, Angie turned to the produce supervisor. "Okay," she said, "let's pretend that Desaria's is a brand-new restaurant." For the next few hours, he tossed information at her like a circus performer. She caught every word and wrote it down, then did the same thing at the fish and vegetable markets. She must have asked 100 questions. What does it mean if the fish was flash frozen? What are the best kinds of clams? Oysters. Why would we want to buy squid ink? How do you pick a good cantaloupe? Why is Dungeness crab better than snow or king? The vendors answered each question patiently, and by the end of the week, Angie was beginning to understand how they could improve the menu. She collected recipes and menus compulsively from some of the most famous restaurants in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York. All of them, she noticed, used the freshest local ingredients for seasonal dishes. In addition, she read all of her father's notes and records and interrogated her sisters until they begged for mercy. For the first time in her life, She was becoming a part of the restaurant, instead of a satellite in its orbit. To Angie's and everyone else's surprise, she loved it. On Saturday night, in between helping Lauren waitress, she read over the accounts payable, paid bills, and jotted down some notes on what supplies were running low. The day passed in a blur of activity, and by the time the last guests left, she was exhausted. It felt great. She said goodnight to Mama and Mira, and then got 2 bowls of gelato and sat down at a table by the fireplace. She loved this time of night, in the quiet of the closed restaurant. It relaxed her, and sometimes, in the crackle of the fire or the tap of rain on the roof, she felt her father's presence. "I'm going home now, Angie," Lauren said, walking through the dining room. "Have some of this gelato with me. It's delicious." It had become a ritual in the past few nights, Angie and Lauren sharing dessert at the end of the evening. Angie actually looked forward to it. Lauren grinned. "At this rate, I'll have to waddle to the dance." Angie laughed. "Funny. Sit." Lauren sat down across from her, where Angie had already placed a bowl of the gelato and a spoon. She spooned out a bit of gelato, let it melt in her mouth. "Man, this is good. Too bad we hardly had any customers tonight." She looked at Lauren. "Your tips can't be too good?" "They're not. The ad for the coat drive hits tomorrow. That should help." "I hope so." Angie heard the desperate edge in Lauren's voice. "How much does a homecoming dress cost these days?" Lauren sighed. "Lots." Angie studied her. "What size are you?" "An 8. "Same as me." The answer was there, plain as the spoon in her hand. "I could loan you a dress. Conlon, my ex-husband, was a reporter for the Seattle Times. Every now and then we went to some event, so I have a few dresses. One of them might fit you." The look on Lauren's face was easy to read, a combination of longing and shame. "I couldn't do that, but thanks." Angie decided not to push the offer. Lauren could think about it. "You're going with the boy who picks you up from work?" Lauren blushed. "David Haynes." Angie saw the transformation, knew what it meant. Love. It was no surprise. Lauren was a serious girl, the kind who fell in love hard and didn't come out of it easily. A good girl, in other words. "How long have you and David been dating?" "Almost 4 years." Angie lifted her eyebrows. High school years were like those of a dog's life. 4 years could be a lifetime. She wanted to say, "Be careful, Lauren. Love can kill you." But of course she didn't. If Lauren was lucky, it was a lesson she'd never learn. The thought made Angie sigh. Suddenly she was thinking about Conlon and all the years she'd loved him, and how it had felt when it was gone. She got up from the table quickly, before her sadness could be seen. She stood by the window, staring out at the night. The cold of autumn had come early this year. Already a layer of frost was forming on the street. All over town, leaves were falling from shivering trees, landing in piles on the sidewalk and along the roadsides. By this time next week, those heaps would be slippery and black. Soon there would be no leaves left. "Are you okay?" Angie heard the worry in Lauren's voice, and it embarrassed her. "Fine." Before she could say more, apologize, or perhaps explain, a car pulled up outside the restaurant and honked. "That's David," Lauren said, popping to her feet. Angie looked at the car out front. It was a classic Porsche Speedster, painted primer gray. The wheels shone with chrome, and the tires were obviously new. "That's some car." Lauren came up beside her. "I call him Speed Racer sometimes. You know, from the old cartoon, 'cause he lives for that car." "Ah, a boy in his car." Lauren laughed. "If I have to see one more paint chip, I might scream." Of course, I don't tell him that." Angie stared down at the girl. Never had she seen such purity of emotion, such blatant adoration. First love. All at once she remembered how consuming it was. She almost said, "You be careful, Lauren." But it wasn't her place. Such advice was for a mother to give. "See you Tuesday," Lauren said, leaving. Angie watched Lauren go outside. The girl ran across the sidewalk and disappeared into the sports car. And suddenly, she was thinking of a long time ago, back when she'd been head over heels in love with Tommy Matucci. He'd driven an old, battered Ford Fairlane. Rickety and temperamental as that car had been, he'd loved it. Funny. She hadn't thought of that in years. They parked in front of Lauren's building, in their usual spot. She gently eased herself into position. It wasn't easy in a car this small. The gear shift seemed to take up a lot of space. Still, they'd had years to perfect their technique. David took her in his arms and kissed her. She felt herself falling into that familiar, breathy darkness, that kneading. Her heartbeat sped up. Within minutes, the windows were fogged up and their privacy was complete. "Lauren," he murmured, and she heard it in his voice, too, that kneading of her. His hand slid beneath her blouse. She shivered at the touch. Then his wristwatch started to bleat. "Shit," he groaned, easing his hand from her body. "It's 11:45. I can't believe they make me come home this early. I know 8th graders who can stay out till midnight." He crossed his arms with a dramatic flourish. It was all Lauren could do not to smile. He had no idea how childish he looked right now. The great David Ryerson Haynes, pouting. "You're lucky," she said, snuggling up to him. "It means they love you." "Yeah, right." Lauren felt his heartbeat. It fluttered beneath her palm. For a second, just that, she felt older than him by years. "Your mom doesn't give a shit what time you get home, or even if you come home." "My point exactly," she said, feeling a swell of the old bitterness. She and Mom had tackled the issue of curfews a long time ago. "I won't be your warden," Mom had said. "My parents tried that, and it only made me more wild." Now Lauren could come and go as she pleased. David kissed her again, and then drew back with a sigh. She knew instantly that something was wrong. "What's the matter?" He leaned across her, opened the glove box. "Here," he said, handing her some papers. "What?" She looked down. "The Stanford application. My dad wants me to go for early decision. It's due November 15th. "Oh," Lauren said, easing back into her own seat. She knew he'd do anything to please his father. "I thought you could do it too." The eagerness in his voice made her want to cry. How could he drive her home, see her apartment, and not get it? "I can't afford to do that, David. I need a scholarship, and not a few vanity bucks. I need a full ride." His breath exhaled heavily. "I know." They sat that way for a few long minutes, each in a separate seat, not touching, staring at the foggy windshield. "I probably won't get in," he said at last. "Come on, David. They have a building named after your family." "Then you will too." He turned to her then, gathered her into his arms and held her, kissed her. She let herself be swept into that kiss, until nothing else mattered but them. Later, when she was alone again, walking through the sad darkness of her apartment, she couldn't help wishing she lived in his world, where everything came easy. Dreams, most of all. When Mira returned from carpool, Angie was standing on her front porch. "You're up bright and early," Mira said, walking up the path. "And you sort of looked like shit." "You should talk." Does everyone wear ripped sweatpants and rubber shoes for carpool? Most of us. Come on in. Smiling, she led Angie into the house, which smelled of coffee and pancakes. Picking up toys along the way, she went to the kitchen and poured 2 cups of coffee. "Okay," she said, settling into a plaid overstuffed chair in the cluttered family room. "Why are you here? And why do you look like a Survivor contestant?" "Very funny." Angie plopped into a chair. "I was up most of the night, working." "Working, huh?" Mira sipped her coffee and eyed Angie over the chipped rim. Angie handed her sister a notebook. "Here's what I want to do." Mira set down her mug and opened the notebook. Surprise widened her eyes as she read. Angie launched into it. "In addition to the coat promotion, I've planned for wine night on Tuesdays, where all bottles would be half off. Date night on Thursdays, where dinner would come with 2 movie tickets. And happy hour on Fridays and Saturdays. We could open the restaurant at 3 o'clock and serve drinks and free hors d'oeuvres until 5 o'clock. You know, antipasti, bruschetta, that kind of thing. My research indicates that a few happy hours a week could almost double our weekly gross. We're wasting our liquor license by using it for a drink here and there. And how's this? Rediscover romance at Dasaria's. It's my ad tagline. I thought we could hand out roses to all the couples who come in." "Holy shit," Mira muttered. Angie knew what that meant. Her sister had come to the big item, the menu change. "I want us to double the prices and cut half the items on the current menu. We need to do more fresh fish and seasonal vegetables." "Holy shit," Mira said again, looking up. "Papa would have loved this, Ange." "I know. It's Mama I'm worried about." Mira laughed. "As we used to say, duh." "How do I pitch these ideas to her?" "From a distance, preferably wearing body armor." "Funny." "Okay, Princess, there are 2 ways to get around Mama. The first and most obvious is to use Papa. Ultimately, she's always done anything to make him happy. Unfortunately, she's the one he's talking to. Yeah, so you'll need Plan B. Make her think it's her idea. I did that when I wanted to go see Wings at the Kingdome. It took almost a month, but she finally decided I wouldn't be American enough if I didn't go with my friends. How do I do that? It starts with asking for advice. Chapter 10. Lauren stood in the center of the dining room, staring down at the collection of salt and pepper shakers she'd gathered together. All night she'd been trying to figure out how to ask Angie for an advance on her first paycheck, or to borrow a dress. Either way, she'd look like a real loser. Not to mention that they might wonder what had happened to her tip money. "Drugs," Maria would say, shaking her head. "So sad." No doubt she'd blame it all on Lauren's red hair. If she told the truth, that she'd had to cough up back due rent, Maria and Angie would give each other that startled, "Oh, she's poor, how pathetic" look. Lauren had seen that look 100 times in her life, from teachers and school counselors and neighbors. She went to the window, stared out at the foggy night. There were moments that mattered, that changed your life. Was a homecoming dance one of those memories that should be acquired at all costs? Would she be lessened somehow by a failure to attend? Perhaps she should go in a vintage dress and pretend it was a fashion statement, an airy disregard for convention instead of a response to her penniless life. They all knew she was on scholarship anyway. No one would say anything. But Lauren would know. All night she'd felt a little broken inside. Was the dance worth that? These were questions a girl should ask her mother. "Ha," Lauren said without a trace of humor. As usual, she had to follow her own counsel. There were 2 choices. She could tell David she was sick and not go to the dance, or she could ask Angie for help. Angie sat at the stainless steel counter, Notes and papers were spread out in front of her. Mama stood with her back to the sink, her arms crossed. It didn't take an expert to read her body language. Her eyes were narrowed, and her mouth was a needle-thin line of displeasure. Angie proceeded with the utmost caution. "I've spoken with Scott Foreman at the theater. He's ready to give us a 50% discount on tickets if we include him in our ads." Mama sniffed. "The movies are terrible these days. So much violence. It will upset people's stomach." "They'll be eating before the movie." "Exactly." Angie pressed forward. Business had really picked up since the inception of the coat drive. It was time to implement the rest of her plan. "Do you think it's a good idea?" Mama shrugged. "We will see, I suppose." "And the advertising, you think that's smart? How much does it cost?" Angie laid out the pricing sheets. Mama glanced at them, but didn't move from her place at the sink. "Too much." "I'll see if I can negotiate better pricing." She gently moved her notepad, revealing a menu from Cassiopeia's, the 4-star Italian restaurant in Vancouver. "Do you have any suggestions for wine night?" Mama sniffed. "We could talk to Victoria and Casey McClellan. They own that winery in Walla Walla, what's it called, Seven Hills? And Randy Finley, up at Mount Baker Vineyards, makes good wines. Maybe they could give us a good rate to feature their wines. Randy loves my ossobuco." "That's a great idea, Mama." Angie made some more notes on her list. When she finished, she nudged the Cassiopeia menu. Mama craned her neck forward and tilted her head. "What's that?" "What?" Angie bit back a smile. "Now, about the fresh fish, Angela Rose, why do you have that menu on your desk?" Angie feigned surprise. "This? I was just interested in our competition." Mama waved her hand airily. "They have never even been to the old country, those people." "Their pricing is interesting." Mama looked at her. "How so?" "The entrees start at $14.95 and go up from there." Angie paused, shaking her head. "It's sad that so many people equate high prices with quality." "Give me that." Mama snatched the menu from the table and whipped it open. "Herbed pancakes with wild mushroom butter and pan-fried whitefish for $21.95. This is not Italian. My mama, God rest her soul, made a tonno al cartoccio, tuna baked in parchment that melted in your mouth." "Terry has tuna on sale this week, Mama. Ahi, too. And his calamari steaks were beautiful." "You are remembering your papa's favorite, calamari ripleni. It takes the very best tomatoes. Johnny from the farmer's market promises me red heaven. Calamari and ahi are expensive. We could try it for a night or two and advertise special. If it doesn't work, we can forget about it." There was a knock at the door. Angie swore under her breath. Mama was close to agreeing. Any little change could send them back to square one. Lauren walked into the kitchen, clutching her neatly folded apron. "Good night, Lauren," Angie said. "Lock up on your way out." Lauren didn't move. She looked confused somehow, uncertain. "Thank you, Lauren," Mama said. "Have a nice evening." Lauren didn't move. "What is it?" Angie asked. Lauren frowned. "I can work tomorrow night, after all." "Great," Angie said, going back to her notes. "See you at 5 o'clock." The minute Lauren left, Angie returned to the discussion. "So, Mama, what do you think about upping the prices a little and adding a daily fish special?" "I think my daughter is trying to change the menu that has been good enough for Desarias for years." "Small changes, Mama, the kind that take us forward in time." She paused, loading the big gun. "Papa would have approved." "He loved my calamari ripleni, it's true." Mama pushed away from the sink and sat down beside Angie. "I remember when your papa bought me the Cadillac. He was so proud of that car." "But you wouldn't drive it," Mama smiled. Your papa thought I was crazy, ignoring that beautiful car. So one day he sold my Buick and left the new car keys on the table, along with a note that read, "Meet me for lunch. I'll bring the wine." She smiled. He knew I had to be pushed into change. I don't want to push too hard. Yes, you do, Mama sighed. Your whole life has been about pushing, Angela, getting what you want. She touched Angie's cheek. Your papa loved that about you, and he'd be so proud of you right now. Suddenly, Angie wasn't thinking about the menu at all. She was thinking about her father and all the things that she missed about him. The way he hefted her on his shoulder to watch the Thanksgiving Day parade. The way he said prayers with her at night and told silly, meaningless jokes at the breakfast table. So, Mama said, her eyes misty too, we will try a few specials this week, and then we will see. It'll work, Mama. You'll see. Business will really pick up when the ads start. We're the back page of the entertainment section on Sunday. Already more people are coming. I must admit that. It's a good thing you hired that girl. She's been a good waitress, Mama said. When you hired her, a redhead, I was sure we were in for trouble. And when you told me about the poor thing needing a dress, I thought, oh no! Angie shot to her feet. The dance! What's the matter? Tomorrow night is homecoming. That's why Lauren was hanging around in the kitchen. She wanted to remind me that she needed tomorrow night off. Then why did she say she'd work? I don't know. Angie fished her car keys out of her pocket and grabbed her coat off the hook by the door. Bye, Mama. See you tomorrow. Angie hurried from the restaurant. Outside, a light rain was falling. She looked up and down the street. No Lauren. She ran to the parking lot and got in her car, heading north on Driftwood. There wasn't another car on the road. She was about to turn onto the highway when she noticed the bus stop. Light from a nearby street lamp spilled down, giving everything a soft amber glow. Even from this distance, she could see Lauren's copper-red hair. She pulled up in front of her. Lauren looked up slowly. Her eyes were red and swollen. "Oh," she said, snapping upright when she saw Angie. Angie hit the window button. The glass slid downward. Cold air immediately whooshed into the car. She leaned toward the passenger side. "Get in." Lauren pointed behind her. "My bus is here, but thanks." "Tomorrow is the dance, right?" Angie said. "That's what you were trying to tell me in the kitchen." "Don't worry about it. I'm not going." "Why not?" Lauren looked away. "I don't feel like it." Angie glanced down at the girl's old, too-worn shoes. "I offered to loan you a dress, remember?" Lauren nodded. A pathetically hope-filled look filled her eyes. "Yes? Do you need one?" "Yes." The answer was barely audible. "Okay. You be at the restaurant at 3:00. Have you made arrangements to get dressed at a friend's house?" Lauren shook her head. "Would you like to get ready at my house? It might be fun." "Really? I'd love that." "Okay. Call David and tell him to pick you up at my house. 7998 Miracle Mile Road. It's the first driveway after the bridge." The bus pulled up behind them and honked. It wasn't until much later, when Angie walked into her dark, empty house, that she wondered whether she'd made a mistake. Getting a girl ready for a dance was a mother's job. The next morning, Angie hit the ground running. At 7:00, she and Mama met with suppliers and delivery men. By 10, they'd ordered most of the week's food, checked the vegetables and fruits for freshness, made out the payroll checks, deposited money in the restaurant's account, and dropped the tablecloths off at the laundry. When Mama went off to do her own errands, Angie headed for the printers, where she had flyers and coupons made for wine and date night. Then she dropped off the first batch of donated coats to Help Your Neighbor. It started raining when she was at the dry cleaners. By noon, it was a full-on rainstorm. The streets were a cauldron of boiling water. There was nothing new in that. The weather this time of year was predictable. From now until early May, it would be gray skies and raindrops. Sunlight in the coming months would be a rare and unexpected gift that couldn't be counted on and wouldn't last. Those who couldn't stand the continual shadow world of misty gray would find themselves waking in the middle of the night, restless, unable to sleep through the sound of rain on the roofs. She pulled up to the restaurant, 15 minutes late. Lauren stood on the sidewalk, beneath the restaurant's green and white awning. There was an old blue backpack on the sidewalk at her feet. Angie rolled down the window. "Sorry I'm late." "I thought you'd forgotten." Angie wondered if anyone kept the promises made to this girl, or if, in fact, any promises were ever made. "Get in," she said, opening the passenger door. "Are you sure?" Angie smiled. "Believe me, Lauren, I'm always sure. Livy is covering my shift. Now get in." Lauren did as she was told, shutting the door hard. Rain hammered the car, made it shake and rattle. They drove in silence. Rain marched across the windshield. The metronomic thwop, thwop, thwop of the wipers was so loud it didn't make sense to talk. When they reached the cottage, Angie parked close to the front door. Angie turned to Lauren. "Do you think we should call your mom? Maybe she'd like to join us." Lauren laughed. It was a bitter, humorless sound. "I don't think so." She seemed to realize how harsh she'd sounded. She smiled and shrugged. "She's not one for dances." Angie didn't go down the road of those words. She was this girl's boss, that was all. She was loaning a dress to Lauren. Just that. "Okay, let's go inside and see what I have." Lauren launched herself sideways, threw her arms around Angie. Her smile was so big it swallowed her face, made her look about 11 years old. "Thank you, Angie. Oh, thank you." Lauren hadn't grown up on make-believe. Unlike most of her friends, she'd spent her childhood hours watching television shows that featured shootouts and hookers and women in jeopardy. Real life, as her mother so often pointed out. There had been no cartoons in the Ribideau apartment, no Disney specials. By the tender age of 7, Lauren knew that Prince Charming was a crock. When she lay in her narrow twin bed in her apartment that smelled vaguely of cigarettes and beer, she didn't dream of being Cinderella or Snow White. She'd never seen the point in the sweep-you-off-your-feet, white-dressed princess fantasy. Until tonight. Angie Malone had opened a door for Lauren on this night, and the view from its porch was staggering. It was a world that seemed bathed in sunlight and possibility. First had come the dress. No, first had come the house. "My papa built this place," Angie had said. "When I was a kid, we spent summers out here." The house was tucked in between towering trees. The music of the distant surf filled the air. The wraparound porch outlined the shingled 2-story cottage. Wicker rocking chairs were positioned carefully here and there. One could imagine sitting there, sipping hot cocoa on a day like today, watching the silver-tipped ocean below. When Lauren saw the cottage, she stopped. This was the kind of home she'd always dreamed of. "Lauren?" Angie had said, looking back at her. Just looking at this home sparked a well of wanting. "Sorry," Lauren said, lurching forward. Inside, the house was every bit as perfect as the exterior had implied. Big, overstuffed denim sofas faced one another in front of a river rock fireplace. The kitchen was small and cheery, with butter-yellow cabinets and a picture window that looked past the porch to a rose garden. Huge fir trees ringed the property, made it feel worlds away from any neighbor. "It's beautiful," Lauren whispered. "Thanks. We like it." "So," Angie said, bending down to light a fire, "what look do you want to go for?" Huh? Angie turned to face her. Sexy? Innocent? Princess? What do you want to be tonight? Any dress is okay. You need serious help in the girlfriend department. Perhaps even send an aid car help. Come on. She walked past Lauren and headed up the narrow staircase. The steps creaked along the way. Lauren rushed up behind her. They followed a narrow hallway into an airy, lived-in-looking bedroom with a high-peaked white ceiling and whitewashed wood floors. A big four-postered bed dominated the room. On either side, banged-up tables held reading lamps and piles of paperbacks. Angie went to the walk-in closet and pulled the light cord. A single bulb hung overhead, casting a swinging beam of light onto rows of clothing. Let's see here. I only brought a few of my gowns. I was actually going to try selling them on eBay. She moved down to one end of the closet, where several yellow-beige Nordstrom garment bags hung smashed together. Nordstrom. Lauren had never owned anything from that venerable Seattle landmark. Heck, she couldn't afford a cup of coffee at the kiosk outside the store. She took a step back. Angie unzipped a bag and pulled out a long black dress, then turned to her. What do you think? The dress was halter style, with rhinestones at the throat and a double band of bigger stones at the waistline. The fabric was slippery, silk probably. What do I think? Lauren couldn't borrow something like that. What if she spilled on it? You're right, too mature. This is a fun night. Angie dropped the dress on the floor and went back to garment bags, burrowing through them in a frenzy. Lauren bent down and picked up the fallen gown. The material caressed her fingers. She'd never touched fabric so soft. Aha! Angie withdrew another gown, pink this time, the dainty color of a scallop shell. The fabric was heavier, some kind of knit that could expand or contract to fit a woman's or a girl's body. It was a simple sleeveless tank front with a deeply plunging back. It has a built-in bra. Not that 17-year-old breasts need a bra. Angie pulled out another dress. This one was emerald green, with long sleeves and an off-the-shoulder neckline. It was gorgeous, but Lauren's gaze returned to the pink knit. How much did that one cost? She dared to ask. Angie glanced at the pink dress and smiled. This whole thing? I got it at the rack. No, it was at that second-hand store on Capitol Hill. Lauren couldn't help smiling. Yeah, right. So it's the pink, yes? I might damage it. I couldn't... The pink. Angie hung the black and green dresses back up, then slung the pink one over her arm. Shower time. Lauren followed dutifully behind Angie as she tossed the gown on the bed, then headed for the master bathroom. Do you have shoes? Lauren nodded. What color? Black. We can make that work, Angie said as she turned the shower on. I could knit a sweater in the amount of time it takes to heat the water around here. Then started grabbing bottles and jars from the cabinet. This is an exfoliant. You know what that is, don't you? At Lauren's nod, Angie reached for something else. This is a hydrating mask. It helps my skin, makes me look 10 years younger. That would make me a kindergartner. Angie laughed and shoved the products into Lauren's arms. Take a shower, then we'll do your hair and makeup. Lauren took the longest, most luxurious shower of her life. There were no pinging pipes, no water that came and went and suddenly turned cold. She used all of the expensive products, and when she came out, she felt brand new. She dried her hair, then wrapped herself in a thick, oversized white towel and returned to the bedroom. Angie was sitting on the edge of the bed. There was a pile of accessories around her. Hairbrushes and makeup, curling irons and handbags and wraps. I found a beaded black shawl and a black evening bag, and this. She held up a beautiful pink and black butterfly hair clip. Come on, sit down. My sisters and I used to do each other's hair for hours. She tossed a pillow onto the floor in front of her. Lauren dutifully sat down, her back to the bed. Angie immediately started brushing her hair. It felt so good Lauren actually sighed. She couldn't remember ever having her hair brushed. Even when her mother took the time to cut Lauren's hair, there was no brushing involved. "Okay," Angie said after a while. "Now, sit on the bed." Lauren changed positions. Angie knelt in front of her. "Close your eyes." The whisper-soft touch of eyeshadow. A flicking of blush. "I'm going to put some sparkle on your throat. I bought it for my niece, but Mira said it was inappropriate." Lauren slipped into the dress, pushed her boobs into the built-in bra. Angie zipped her up. Slowly, Lauren walked toward the full-length mirror that hung on the back of the closed door. She gasped. For the first time in her life, she looked like all the other girls at school. Chapter 11. Angie stood in front of her dresser. The top drawer was open. There, buried among the bras and panties and socks, was her camera. "To take photos of my grandbabies," Mama had said when she'd given Angie the camera. "Babies," that smile of Mama's said, "grow as naturally as green buds in springtime." Angie sighed. Hope had been so easy back then. For years, Angie had used this camera all the time, documenting every moment of her life. She was there, year after year, snapping pictures at family gatherings, birthday parties, baby showers, preschool graduations. Somewhere along the way, it had begun to cause her pain, this looking through the viewfinder at a life she wanted desperately, but couldn't have. One by one, she'd stopped photographing her nieces and nephews. It simply hurt too much to see her loss in Technicolor. She knew it was selfish of her, and childish, too, but some lines couldn't be crossed. By the time little Danny had been born, only 5 years ago now, it felt like a lifetime, Angie had put the camera away for good. She wouldn't think about that now. She grabbed the camera, refilled the film, and went downstairs. Lauren stood at the fireplace, with her back to the flames. The golden glow wreathed her, gave her pale freckled skin a bronze sheen. The shell-pink gown was a little too big on her and a little too long, but neither flaw was noticeable. With her hair coiled into a French twist and held back by the butterfly clip, she looked like a princess. "You look beautiful," Angie said, coming into the room. She was embarrassed by how much emotion she suddenly felt. It was a little thing, helping a teenage girl get ready for a school dance. Nothing, really, so why did she feel so much? "Wow, I look beautiful," Lauren said. There was wonder in her voice, surprise. Angie needed the distance of a viewfinder suddenly. She started snapping photographs. She kept taking them, one after another, until Lauren laughed and said, "Wait, save some film for David." Angie felt like an idiot. "You're right. Have a seat. I'll get us tea while we wait." She went into the kitchen. "He said he'd be here at 7 o'clock. We're going to the club for dinner." In the kitchen, Angie made 2 cups of tea. "The club, huh? Pretty hoity-toity." Lauren giggled. She looked impossibly young just then, perched as she was on the very edge of the sofa. Obviously, she was afraid to wrinkle her gown. She sipped her tea with extreme care, holding the cup with 2 hands. Angie felt a surge of emotion. She was afraid of what the world could do to a girl like this, one who seemed sometimes to be too alone. "You're looking at me weird. Am I holding the cup wrong?" Lauren asked. "No." Angie quickly took another photograph. As she lowered the camera back to her lap, she met Lauren's starry-eyed gaze. How could a mother not want to experience this moment? "I guess you've gone to lots of school dances," she said. That was probably the answer. "Yeah, most of them." Lauren didn't seem to really be listening, though. Her voice sounded distracted. Finally, she set down her teacup and said, "Can I ask you something?" Generally, that's a question one should say no to. Often hell no. "Really, can I?" "Fire away." Angie leaned back into the sofa's denim pillows. Lauren looked at her then. "Why did you do all this for me tonight?" "I like you, Lauren. That's all. I wanted to help." "I think it's because you feel sorry for me." Angie sighed. She knew she couldn't deflect the question. Lauren wanted a real answer. "That was part of it, maybe. Mostly, though, I know how it feels not to get what you want." "You?" Angie swallowed hard. A part of her wished she hadn't opened this particular door, and yet it had felt so natural to speak, though now that she'd begun, she didn't know quite how to move forward. "I don't have children," she said. "Why not?" Angie actually appreciated the directness of the question. Women her own age tended to recognize the landmine in this conversation and walk gingerly around it. "The doctors don't know exactly. I've been pregnant 3 times, but—" She thought of Sophia and closed her eyes for a second, then went on. "No luck." "So you liked helping me get ready?" There was a wistfulness in Lauren's voice that matched Angie's own emotions. "I did," she answered softly. She was about to say something else when the doorbell rang. "It's David," Lauren said, popping to her feet, running for the door. "Stop!" Angie called out. "What?" "A lady is called when the date arrives. Go upstairs. I'll answer the door." "Really?" Lauren's voice was barely above a whisper. "Go." As soon as Lauren was upstairs, Angie went to the front door and opened it. David stood on the small porch. In a flawlessly cut black tuxedo with a white shirt and silver tie, he was every teenage girl's dream. "You must be David. I've seen you drive up to the restaurant. I'm Angie Malone." He shook her hand so hard she swore she felt the bones clamped together. "David Ryerson Haynes," he said, smiling nervously, looking past her. Angie stepped back, ushered him inside. "Of the Timber family? That's us. Is Lauren ready?" That explained the Porsche. She called out Lauren's name. Within a second, she appeared at the top of the stairs. David gasped. "Whoa," he said softly, moving toward the stairs. "You look awesome." Lauren's mouth formed a trembling smile. "You think so?" He handed her a white wrist corsage, then kissed her. Even from across the room, Angie could see the gentleness of that kiss, and it made her smile. "Come on, you two," she said. "Photo op. Stand by the fireplace." Angie snapped several pictures. It took an act of will to stop. "Okay," she finally said. "Have fun. Drive safely." She wasn't even sure they heard her. Lauren and David were lost in each other's eyes. But at the front door, Lauren turned to Angie and threw her arms around her, holding on in a death grip's hug. "I'll never forget this," she whispered. "Thank you." Angie whispered back, "You're welcome." But her throat was suddenly tight, and she wasn't sure if her words carried any sound or not. She stood there as David opened the car door for Lauren. In the amount of time it took to wave, they were gone. It didn't surprise Angie at all to realize that she was crying. She backed into the house and closed the door. The silence seemed oppressive suddenly. She'd forgotten how quiet her life was. Lately, if she didn't turn on the television or the stereo, she would hear nothing except her own breathing or the patter of her own footsteps on the hardwood floor. She felt herself slipping down a slope she knew too well. At the bottom, it was lonely and cold. She didn't want to go down there again. It had taken so long to crawl out. She wished she could call Conlon right now. He'd once been so good at talking her down from the ledge. But those days were gone, too. The phone rang. Thank God. She ran to answer it. "Hello?" She was surprised at how ordinary her voice sounded. A drowning woman shouldn't speak in so certain a voice. "How did the dance preparations go?" It was Mama. "Great!" She looked beautiful. Angie made herself laugh, prayed it sounded more natural than it felt. "Are you okay?" She loved her mother for asking. "I'm fine. I think I'll go to bed for a while. We'll talk in the morning, okay?" "I love you, Angela." "Love you too, Mama." She was trembling when she hung up. She thought about doing a lot of things: putting in a movie, reading a book, working on the new menu. In the end, though, she was too tired for any of it. She crawled into her big king-size bed, pulled the covers up to her chin, and closed her eyes. Sometime later, she woke up. Someone was calling her name. She glanced at the clock. It wasn't even 8 o'clock. She crawled out of bed and stumbled down the stairs. Mama stood in the kitchen, her clothes dappled with raindrops, her red-splattered apron still in place. She put her hands on her hips. "You are not fine." "I will be. I will be 90 someday. That doesn't mean getting there will be easy. Come." She took Angie by the hand and led her toward the sofa. They sat down, cuddled together the way they'd done when Angie was a girl. Mama stroked her hair. It was fun helping her get ready for the dance. It wasn't until later, after she'd left, that I started thinking about— "I know," Mama said gently. Angie sighed. She knew that no matter how long she lived, this pain would sometimes feel fresh. Some losses ran deep, and time moved too slowly in a lifetime to heal them completely. "I lost the sun once," Mama said into the silence that fell between them. Angie gasped, twisted around. "You never told us that." "Some things are too painful to speak of. He would have been my first." "Why didn't you tell me?" "I couldn't." Angie felt her mother's pain. It connected them, that common loss, brought them to a place that felt like friendship. "I wanted to say only hopeful things." "I know." Angie stared down at her own hands. For a split second, she was surprised to see that her wedding ring was gone. "Be careful with this girl, Angela," her mother said gently. It was the second time she'd been given this advice. Angie wondered if she could follow it. Sunshine on an autumn's morning was a gift from God himself, as rare as pink diamonds in this part of the world. Lauren took it as a sign. She stretched lazily, coming slowly awake. She could hear the hum of cars on the street. Next door, the neighbors were fighting. Somewhere, a car horn honked. In the bedroom down the hall, her mother was sleeping off a late-night bender. To the rest of the world, it was an ordinary Sunday morning. Lauren rolled onto her side. The old mattress that had been her bed for as long as she could remember squeaked at the movement. David lay sprawled on his back, his hair a tangled mess that obscured half of his face. One arm hung off the side of the bed, the other was angled across his head. She could see the red smattering of pimples that dotted his hairline, and the tiny zigzag scar that traced his cheekbone. He'd gotten that in 6th grade, playing touch football. "I bled like a stuck pig," he always said when retelling the story. There was nothing he liked more than bragging about his injuries. She always teased him that he was a hypochondriac. She touched the scar, traced it with the tip of her finger. Last night had been perfect. Better than perfect. She'd felt like a princess, and when David led her out onto the stage, she'd practically floated along behind him. Aerosmith's Angel had been playing. She wondered how long she'd remember that. Would she tell their children the story? Come on, kids, come listen to the story of the night Mommy was crowned homecoming queen. "I love you," David had whispered, holding her hand as the tiara was placed on her head. She remembered looking at him then, seeing him through a blur of tears. She loved him so much it made her chest ache. She couldn't imagine being apart from him. If they went to different colleges, She squeezed her eyes shut. This was all it took, just the thought of different colleges, and she felt sick to her stomach. David came awake slowly. When he saw her, he smiled. "I'll have to tell my folks I'm at Jared's more often." He pulled her into his arms. She fit perfectly against him. It was as if they'd been built for each other. This is what it would be like when they were at college together, and later when they were married. She would never feel alone again. She kissed him, touched him. "My mom never wakes up till noon on Sunday," she said, smiling slowly. He drew back. "My Uncle Peter is meeting me at home in an hour. I have an appointment with some bigwig from Stanford." She drew back. "On Sunday? I thought—" "He's only in town for the weekend. You can come along." Her smile faded, along with her romantic hopes for the day. It pissed her off that he hadn't figured that out. Yeah, right. And if he'd really wanted her to come along, he would have asked her before now. "Don't be that way. Come on, David. Quit dreaming. I'm not going to get a scholarship at Stanford, and I don't have Mommy and Daddy to write a check. You, however, could get into USC. It was an old discussion. His heavy sigh showed that he was tired of it. "First of all, you can get into Stanford. Second of all, if you're at USC, we'll see each other plenty. We love each other, Lauren. It doesn't go away because of a few miles. A few 100 miles. She stared up at the tattered acoustical tile ceiling. A water stain blossomed across one corner. She wished she could smile. "I have to work today anyway." He pulled her closer, gave her one of those slow kisses that made her heart beat faster. She felt her anger dissolve. "I'm sorry," she whispered, clinging to him now. When he finally released her and got out of bed, she felt cold. He gathered up the tucks and redressed. She sat up in bed, with the blankets pulled across her bare breasts. "I had a great time last night." He walked around the bed and sat down beside her. "You worry too much." "Look around you, David." She heard the throatiness of her voice. With anyone else, it would have been embarrassing. "I've always had to worry. Not about me. I love you." "I know that." And she did. She believed it with every cell in her body. She clung to him, kissed him. "Good luck." After he'd gone, Lauren sat there a long time, alone, staring at the open door.